Hello and welcome to our virtual Airspace Cyber Conference 2020 panel on Joint All-Domain Command and Control. I'm Orville Wright, your president of the Air Force Association, and it's an absolute honor to moderate this next session with our outstanding lineup of guests and leaders. Joint warfighting is not new. Since the beginning of our republic, our commander-in-chief has relied on military force in multiple domains to exercise national power. In George Washington's day, those domains were limited to the ground and sea. Today, our commander-in-chief relies on the power in air, space, cyber, ground, and the maritime domains. But the question is, how do commanders at any level and every level tie together warfighting in all those domains? And more specifically, how does a commander exercise command and control of his forces in all domains all the time? Our distinguished group of panelists today will discuss Joint All-Domain Command and Control, known as JADC2. We're blessed today with deep and real-time leadership across multiple elements of Joint All-Domain Command and Control. Assembled virtually with us today, we have Lieutenant General Bradford V.J. Schwartz, Director for Command and Control, Communications and Computers, Cyber, Chief Information Officer, the Joint Staff, the J6. We also have Lieutenant General Chance Salty, the Space Force, the new Space Force Director of Staff. Also, we're joined by Major General Angela Cadwell, Director of Cyberspace Operations at NORAD and U.S. NORTHCOM. And batting cleanup, retired Lieutenant General Bill Bender, Leidos Senior Vice President of Strategic Accounts and Government Relations, and the former A2A6. And again, we can't thank you all enough for being with us today. So let's start our discussion today with opening comments from General Schwartz.
Okay, well, first of all, sir, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's great to see you again. Seeing a former boss, really appreciate all you've done for the Air Force, and thank you for the opportunity. I'll launch right in. I get a lot of questions about JADC2 and why is this, suddenly new. As you said, sir, it's not new. We have done multi-domain for a very long time, and what is new is the sense of urgency in this specific situation. In the past, for the past 2 decades, we've been hijacked by a VEO fight where, quite frankly, command and control and multi-domain operations wasn't as necessary as it is with great power competition. So with the direction of the National Defense Strategy, we are now focused on near-peer threats where we need the capabilities associated with Joint All-Domain C2. So what's different? First of all, we're starting from a atrophied mission set, but more importantly, our adversaries took Desert Storm as a significant emotional event, and they captured all the lessons of what we did during Desert Storm, and they did not atrophy because they were very busy trying to catch up and then find an asymmetrical attack axis. What is new in this scenario also is with the shift to the National Defense Strategy, we now have the attention of senior leadership to get after this problem set fast, and that's exactly what we're doing. What is new with this capability is the opportunities that AI, the cloud, and 5G present to us. And then last, with the capabilities and the weapon systems the bad guys are fielding, you'll find that the advanced nature of these systems of just turning on a waveform and countering a surface-to-air missile is no longer an option. We're going to have to hit those targets with multi-domain, all aspect, creating multi-dilemmas for a bad guy in a future fight. But that's the overall kind of point of view from us at the Joint Staff right now. It is absolutely a priority for the chairman, and we're getting at it after it at speed.
Outstanding. Thanks much. General Saltzman.
Yes, sir. Let me just echo what General Schwartz said. It's really an honor to be a part of this panel. I know this is the first combined Air Force and Space Force AFA Air and Space Symposium, and what an honor it is to be on a panel with these distinguished members for that first symposium. I really can't go into more detail than what General Schwedo did about how important and revolutionary this JADC2 construct is. But it really embodies all the things I've learned recently about warfighting, and that's why I'm excited about it. I kind of come at it from three perspectives. As the MDC2 lead for General Goldfein, I was able to learn that it's not always about what you buy. Sometimes it's more about how you buy it and the process you go through of continuous learning and how fast you can apply those lessons learned in both technologies, operational concepts, doctrine, TTPs are all critical. And I see the method by which we are employing our acquisition community, capabilities and requirements communities, our cyberspace, air communities in capturing those lessons learned, turning them into real concepts and rapidly deploying them to the field. That process is what's going to make it so effective, I think, as a construct. The second perspective that I come at this from is my experience last year as the Deputy Combined Forces Air Component Commander, the DCFAC position out there in Qatar in the Middle East. And, you know, I think there's nothing that clarifies purpose like a high threat environment. And that combat feedback, for me, really showed me how important it is that we're able to operate in multiple domains. If an adversary denies us the ability to create effects in one domain, we can rapidly shift and create effects in a different domain. And that gives us a tremendous operational advantage. But it's not easy. It's not easy to just shift domains. If you don't have the C2 structure, the data structure, the comm infrastructure that allows you to rapidly lift and shift from one domain to another, from one area to another, it's not nearly as powerful. And I think JADC2 is a way to get after that agility, that operational agility that we're going to need in future fights. I also think in those high threat environments, I learned the real power of resiliency, self-healing networks, the ability to use distributed nodes so that we can reduce our targetable footprint, our ability to use multiple data paths so that we're never without the data, the situational awareness that we need to make high-speed operational decisions. And so that experience as the DCFAC, to me, really highlighted how important it is to be able to conduct joint all-domain command and control if we're going to be effective. And then the last, certainly not least, perspective that I viewed JADC2 through is as the growing U.S. Space Force comes into being. In space, as everybody knows, this is not a new domain for those of us in the Department of the Air Force, but as everybody kind of knows, space is inherently a multi-domain operation. It requires that we have satellites on orbit in the space domain, but our operators are grounded and have to communicate through cyber, through networks with those satellites, return the data through those same networks. And then our users are in the air, they're on land, they're at sea, they're in all the operations centers worldwide around the globe. And so our ability to exploit space domain requires that we have an all-domain approach to the network, to the operational concepts, to allow us to get the most out of those capabilities. And so this is a critical concept for us moving forward as a service, as a department, and I think as a joint force. And I'm really excited to see some of the paths that we're taking with regards to joint all-domain command and control. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Salty. And over to Angie.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Equally honored to be participating in the 2020 virtual airspace and cyber conference with you and joining the distinguished members of this JADC2 panel. I am really pleased to know that DoD, industry, and academia share our interest in thinking through these all-domain operational challenges. Really excited to talk with you today about Homeland Defense, a matter of importance to all of us, and it takes all of us to accomplish this critical mission. Homeland Defense is complex and extends beyond just the Department of Defense and really relying on the cooperation between interagency partners. As in past conflicts, we rely on industry and academic assistance to infuse the DoD with new thoughts and ideas, new applications of technologies, and ways of defending against and deterring aggression as we progress and rethink how we think about Homeland Defense. As the Director for Cyberspace Operations in NORAD and NORTHCOM, I thought it would be beneficial for you if I opened up the aperture a bit and discussed the opportunities and challenges we face from an all-domain perspective here in the homeland. NORAD is a binational command providing aerospace warning and control and maritime warning for the US and Canada. And then NORTHCOM stood up after 9/11 with the realization that not all threats we face come from outside of our continent. Our homeland is no longer a sanctuary, even from a pandemic. And we have to be able to recognize how that security environment has evolved and is always going to be constantly changing. When NORAD stood up over 60 years ago, we viewed the oceans in the Arctic as buffer zones. But now those areas have turned into avenues of approach for our adversaries, along with cyber and space, and the confusing information environment we're all tapping into via social media every day. That security environment has changed, and our adversaries have watched the movie over the last several decades on how we conduct warfare. And they're exploiting our perceived weaknesses. They have learned and methodically invested in capabilities and developed doctrines to exploit what they perceive as our vulnerabilities. Our ability to defend the homeland is constantly challenged. We see our adversaries' patterns of behavior, which clearly indicate a willingness and intent to use their capabilities. And we require, as a result, innovative concepts and capabilities to detect, deter, and defeat these advanced threats and make real capabilities like an intuitive multi-sensor grid for domain awareness, a JADC2 adaptive architecture to project power, and new defeat mechanisms against hypersonic missiles, cruise missiles, and the evolving threats that we continue to face. And all these threats are real. We see JADC2 empowering the information dominance to defend our homeland. At NORAD and NORTHCOM, and with the partnerships in DoD and industry, we have made JADC2 real, and General Schwartz has been tremendously helpful for us out here in helping us with resourcing. We couldn't afford the risk of waiting because Homeland Defense is our #1 priority as assigned in the NDS. In the command, we initiated a Pathfinder effort to improve, starting with the air threat and the characterization of ingested data feeds from multiple DoD and FAA sensors. And then we use that data to perform predictive analytics to enable decision space for our senior leaders who are having to make the tough decisions of shoot down, engagement, et cetera. We are teaming with the Air Force's Advanced Battle Management System to experiment and on-ramp these Pathfinder capabilities into a Homeland Defense data ecosystem. And then using data as a strategic asset, the Pathfinder ecosystem exploits machine learning to fuse disparate data sets, automating the identification of threats to North America. And so we see Pathfinder as the heart of the technology revolution for decision superiority. In addition, our efforts in response to the COVID pandemic have driven us to an operational capability for end-to-end reporting, data collection, and visualization for personnel, medical, ops, and logistics across our AOR. This allows our commanders at all levels the right information all at the same time. And as a result, as an added benefit, we experienced, no kidding, a 95% reduction in requests for information and RFIs to the command because all the echelons above us could look at the same information and same data that we were looking at, which would have been our answer to them. So I look forward to the panel discussions, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Angie. You all are right on time, on target. General Bender, some opening comments, Bill, and then we'll circle back for some Q&A. Go ahead, Bill.
Sure, Bill. Thanks for including me in the panel. I appreciate what AFA is doing during a challenging time as you transition to virtual. So thanks for including me. And it's great to be a part of a very distinguished panel. And so it's good to see my friends. I guess what I would say is to comment on BJ's first comment that's come up a couple of times already is this isn't new. There are aspects of it when you get to industry side of things that are indeed new. And so we need to maybe elevate those into the conversation just from a perspective that helps the larger partnership between industry and in this case, the Air Force, but the entire joint community. You know, I reflect back on coming into the CIO job, and one of the first meetings I had was with Tom Hobbins, and he talked about a 194-slide brief for the Air Force ISR flight plan. We transitioned that to about a 30-slide deck and a glossy, which was all around aerial layer networking, and talk about things like mosaic warfare and of course JADC2. So the presentation has changed, but what also has changed is we technically have the ability to do this. And it's a significant step away from all of the yellow arrows that used to be prominent in every one of those presentations. And that's stating the obvious, but it's important as we now step into a partnership with industry. So this is DoD's opportunity, finally, to develop common standards and truly open architectures in a government-owned, non-proprietary way, so that the Air Force, in the case of ABMS, should be very, very demanding in that regard, as I know they're planning to be. Single vendor solutions will not solve the JADC2 problem anyway. In fact, probably the worst thing DoD could do would be to select a specific vendor's branded product or product line to serve as an end-to-end command and control system for ABMS and JADC2. That would be the traditional approach that has locked government into siloed solution, and it perpetuates over time. And it's exactly the thing, as I understand it, with all of our reading and various opportunities to hear what Dr. Roper and Preston Dunlap, as the chief architect at ABMS, are talking about. They're trying to avoid that. Instead, what I would say, if there's one thing that's important from my perspective now in industry, is to take an approach that is around a composable architecture for JADC2 as a better direction. It needs to be more open and flexible than single vendor solutions can provide. It needs to recognize and promote the idea of user-defined situational awareness tools that are composable for the mission that you have that day. That set of circumstances. Technology, as we all have made mention, is changing at such a pace that ABMS needs to serve as building blocks upon which those user-centric systems quickly be assembled, augmented, and extended over time, so that we get to the vision, which is everybody, everywhere, any time of our choosing. So I think it's the proliferation of the software factories throughout the Air Force that BJ and others have ushered in over time that gives the ability to assemble working systems from proven components that can happen very quickly and are adaptable to the changing environment around us. So if we're going to stay ahead of the enemy, ABMS and JADC2 must keep its focus on open architectures comprised of a building block approach. A systems approach is what we're talking about, as opposed to creating a single platform. Now, everybody's been saying that, but the devil's in the detail. How do you do that? And I would say that it's going to take increased partnership with industry to work through it. So with that as the preamble for my comments, again, I'm really happy to have an opportunity to contribute to this panel. Thanks.
That's terrific, Bill. Thanks. And in fact, it's a good segue to a conversation that General Schwartz and I had earlier about a different partnership, a different set of acquisition processes, if you will, between the warfighters, the joint warfighters, and industry to get at this problem. So, BJ, based on our conversations, as you lead and have the responsibility in the joint staff to get the services own C2 systems talking to each other, how do you guard against those interfaces also being an attack surface for adversaries? And this goes to the services talking to each other as well as talking with allies. And then what can be done to assure all users have what they're seeing, know that what they're seeing is not being altered or tampered with. I'd also, you're an expert on this, offer that this is not all about defense. Should an adversary try to tamper with us or degrade us, the best defense is a good offense. So if you could talk a bit about that as a response to a question, that I think will frame some additional Q&A here. So BJ, please.
Sure. So just to cover a couple of things General Bender went through. First of all, demarcation line between the people in the military and industry are gone. You, industry, you're in the foxhole with us. And it's a game of speed. It's all about speed. And, quite frankly, I think General Bender hit pretty hard the proprietary problems we've had in the past. And whether it's we don't own the data or a problem with vendor lock, the bottom line is we need the open architecture. And I've had friends come in, and if they're watching, I apologize, but they were standing on my desk telling me they needed to be the one that brought all of JADC2 together, and they were going to do it all for me. air, land, sea, space, cyber. And they had a proprietary capability that was doing it. And I said, I hate to tell you this, but you're a buggy whip salesman in a world of Ferraris, because we have got to be able to use these open architectures. We've got to be able to bring in our partners, our coalition. And once again, this whole thing is being driven by the National Defense Strategy that says make the shift from violent extremists to great power competition. And because the NDS says we will not fight without our allies, we've got to make sure that we're sharing all the architecture, all of the standards, all of the things that make JADC2 happen. Another thing we need to do is, in this spy versus spy thing you were talking about earlier, General Wright, the bottom line is it is a game of speed. So on the defensive side, General Saltman talked about being able to shift from different comms capabilities. We call it a PACE plan: primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. And we're constantly flexing. And if you think about OODA loops, everybody's focused on the OODA loop that makes it smaller. And that's spot on. We need to make it smaller. And that's where you bring in new technologies to shorten that OODA loop. But everybody forgets about what you brought up, which is also complementary fires making their OODA loop longer and doing lots of insertions. And what you'll find is the opportunities one realm feed more opportunities in the other realm. And when you're getting into this game of speed, you've got to make sure that you're constantly patching and you're leaving opportunities to come over the top. So back to what industry can do for us. We've got to fix this problem from future capabilities, making sure that open architecture works for future, and we're coming through all the standards and architectures. I was just in a JROC session yesterday talking about this, but also we're not going to throw away all of these legacy systems. So we've got to make sure that the legacy systems are also joint all-domain C2 capable. So how are we going after that? The chairman's joint document associated with joint ops says we're going to use experimentation and exercises to do that. In the past, while we were barely funding the P in PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency, we were taking risk in this interoperability. That's no longer a factor. So when we use these exercises, we're saying no more white cards. And we white card these problems over and over again. And we in the Joint Staff, one of our exercises that we sponsor is called BowQuest. I was in Finland, and I watched an airplane pull up, and we said, no white cards. Whatever is the problem, then you take off without it. And they had just put a patch on this airplane, which is basically a flying computer, and it was not able to talk to the JTACs. So I saw a team, three-nation team, crawl all over the software associated with this, change a 1 to a 0 so they could talk to the joint tactical controllers, and boom, they were off again. That is the speed that you've got to get rolling. And then, by the way, you have to roll back and counter their capabilities that brought that piece in. And you'll find that one will provide an opportunity to the other. But you can't look at one OODA loop in one isolation and then the other OODA loop. You'll rapidly find that it's got complementary fires, and you'll find a line of operations called information operations that works that. So that's generally, I could talk your ear off, but that's generally what we're thinking. Over.
Well, excellent. In fact, outstanding. General Salty, you have a very applicable background, experienced leadership background to talk to the next question. You led multi-domain operations initiatives for the Air Force, and you went to the fight for a year, and now you're back in a very senior leadership position in space. So focusing on your experience in the fight, up close and personal with Iran, as a matter of fact, we don't fight anywhere, anytime around the world, including with peer adversaries, without reliance on and the capability that comes from precision, navigation, and timing from essentially satellites. Operating in any way, anytime, without that capability is a non-starter. Certainly if we're going to fight the fight every day and then be able to escalate the overwhelming force. So a couple of war stories possibly linked to what industry is doing or not doing or could do, and joint interoperability that you saw that was there or not there in your experience from a year in the middle of the fight. Yeah,
thanks for that question. That's exactly right. I mean, the the bases, the infrastructure that we've designed in the Middle East over the years is almost perfectly arrayed for the counterinsurgency, counterterrorism fight that was playing out in Iraq and Afghanistan. We were perfectly arrayed. The minute we got some pushback from Iran and some different partners, all of a sudden, what was a strength for us in our array across the Middle East became a serious vulnerability. And we were all of a sudden in threat rings that we had to pay attention to. And that strength of our distributed network, the long haul comm, the radar systems that brought data back to that central fusion point of the AOC, that strength of that capability suddenly became a tremendous vulnerability. If we were to lose the KAOC, how do we fight the air war? How do we continue to provide all the critical support across the AOR without the AOC? Now, I know that's kind of a narrow view, but that was my view because that's where I was sitting. And when all of a sudden you were asked, okay, if you can't perform your duties from here, how does the air component continue to be successful? And we had to look ourselves in the eye and say, well, there's going to be some problems. And so I saw tremendous progress leveraging some of the initiatives that I think ultimately were coming out of the JADC2 discussion. And it was things like distributed data architectures, cloud hosted services that allowed us to be less concerned about where we were and more concerned about where the effects needed to be. And so we weren't worried that there was this fusion engine inside the KAOC that was central to our warfighting effort, because we could distribute that either back to Shaw or to forward places like the JOC up in Baghdad or to other locations. We started to experiment with mission type orders because we knew we might get cut off. And how do we continue to provide packaged capability but give commanders in distributed forward locations the authorities, the responsibilities, and the tools they needed to be able to conduct that mission without us? Again, these are all JADC2 requirements. Some of them are technology, and some of them are the operational concepts that are going to be required to operate in a contested environment. And I'll tell you that, again, that combat feedback is very crystallizing in terms of what objectives and what your key vulnerabilities are. And luckily, I was able to reach back into an Air Force and into a joint set of services that were thinking about how to do distributed ops, how to pull data together in a cloud-based format and leverage those technologies. And so I think we got to a pretty good point, and I know they're continuing to work those issues, but we're turning what was a vulnerability into, again, a strength, our ability to project power globally and from a number of distributed locations.
Thanks. Great. Shifting to Major General Cadwell, Angie, what kind of new things were tried in this month's ABMS experience that you're probably the most current spokesman for right now? And is there anything about that ABM experiment that you could offer right now that more quickly could be put into the field, including industry response? And then could you also talk just a little bit about interagency comms? You're talking to the Department for Homeland Security, you're talking to states. There's probably some lessons learned there for, in your experience, for how joint all-domain command and control really has to work across the services and obviously with the allies, with your Canadian counterparts, and with the interagency.
Yes, sir. Great question. We had to do a lot of work because the systems that we had in place, the networks and the systems themselves, just couldn't adapt quickly enough to the things that we were trying to develop. They couldn't handle the threats that were evolving. They couldn't handle terabytes of, for example, radar data. Our systems were literally designed to handle gigabytes of data because they're decades old. And so we really had to, we first tried to see what would it take to leapfrog our legacy systems forward into the 21st century. And the timelines and the cost figures were just non-starters for us. So we decided to start over, and rather than follow kind of the traditional approach of saying what companies are out there that have done, for example, air defense work before, we looked for partners in industry that focused on data. We said, this is at its core a data problem. And so in partnership with the Defense Innovation Unit guys, Defense Digital Service guys, we embarked on a prototype project, and we started with the air domain because between DoD, FAA, and our NORAD regions and sectors, we have control over that and easy access to that data. So we started with the air domain and embarked on a prototype with some Silicon Valley type companies and started to do this prototype that ingested the volumes of radar feeds that were available, and not just in the United States, but up in Canada as well. And what we were finding was the radars were picking up the new kinds of threats. And at the unclassified level, I'll use drones or UASs as an example. The radars were picking them up, but our legacy backend data systems couldn't process them because they were looking for a threat from the 80s. And so it would literally discard that data on the floor, and our operators had to use experience and calculating what the raw radar was showing them on their screen and then interpreting that based on their experience. And I think Lieutenant General Saltzman has probably seen that forward in the theater as well, but we had the same challenge here in the homeland. So we went from, we call it bar napkin to a signed contract in 82 days. And so that's a change for how we do the acquisition approach in the Department of Defense. So that was new for us as well. And right now, within 6 months, that prototype, that Pathfinder prototype, is sitting at our NORAD sectors. It has not replaced the legacy systems because we have to go through the OT&E process, but it is sitting there, and the operators can double check the legacy system versus a data-centric system is able to tell them. And we're finding that we're seeing a lot more things, and we're able to make decisions and assessments in seconds, what was previously taking us minutes because we were having to look at like 8 different stovepipe systems, and then the poor operators having to calculate what that is inside their head. For the advanced battle management system, that's going to be the most amazing demonstration here September 3rd next week of multi-service, lots of weapon systems, all kinds of technology ranging from tablets to full-blown weapon system. We're going to be running cruise missiles, going to be calculating air threats. We're going to be leveraging new technology with towers that on a 360 can detect a threat, and then machine learning tee up options for the operator to decide what's the best target, what's the best weapon system to engage that target that just came up. And all happening within the milliseconds that a computer can do, and teeing up those options for the human to then make the choice of how to do that engagement. And then what you mentioned previously about interagency, a great example has been our COVID response in support of DHS. That's where we invested a lot into the dashboards and mobile devices. So our folks that deployed, a lot of them deployed into New York City hospitals. So they didn't have a DoD structure around them. So we gave them a mobile device. We gave them apps on those devices where we could track where they were, how they were doing. They had to check in every couple of days, twice per shift, excuse me, and then help us understand what was the status of ventilators at that hospital, what was the status of bed capacity, because through the private sector up through the commercial sector, we weren't getting that information quickly because the doctors and nurses were driving on, helping their patients. And so we had folks on scene who could enter that data into the dashboard and could help us at Northcom project where's the next shortage going to be. We were able to leverage artificial intelligence in combination with the MIT Lincoln Labs guys and try to figure out where's the next hotspot going to be. And we could have a conversation with FEMA, DHS, HHS, and pivot to that location ahead of the hotspot developing and make sure we had the supplies in place to catch it. So just an example is we saw the artificial intelligence algorithms were projecting that when New York City had all the challenges and they spiked in the number of patients that they had, that people were going to go north to Connecticut where they had their summer homes, and that would become the next hotspot. And so we proactively pivoted forces up to that location. And the day we arrived, they had some 300 cases. And 2 days later, they were up in the several thousands of cases. And we had gotten there ahead of time. We had gotten there ahead of need. Whereas previously, with the spreadsheets and the slides and that kind of stuff, we were shooting behind the duck. We'd see the hotspot, we'd start to move there, and we'd still be days, even weeks late to getting there and being of real true value. So that JADC2 capability, ranging from devices to the data to the visualization, was absolutely critical and literally life-saving for us. Thank you.
Terrific, Angie. We're going to lose General Schwartz, so I'd like you to wrap up here a little bit before we lose you at 4 or 5, and then we'll go back to Bill Bender. Bill, I'll tell you the hard question I'm going to ask so we can think about it is, how do you go about building a profitable business in JADC2 when you have to build something that either is collaborative with or competitive with your competitive mates. So you'll think about that. But BJ, before we leave, a lot of discussion about the promise of artificial intelligence to speed up decision making. You've worked on that hard, and you could kind of start there and then really go wherever you want to go. And then we'll go back to Bill, and I just wanted to capture before you go out the door there. So please, BJ, go ahead, starting with AI.
I will tell you, I think once again, a lot of the things that we're doing with AI and other things on the concept level is not new. What we're trying to do is get that OODA loop going as fast as we can, but we're also seeing all of these applications, and Angie did a great job explaining how they took the problem to data immediately. And when you look at what they fielded, it was wonderful. She described how they were ahead of the duck the entire time, but what they did was they took an existing platform from a TRL level that was very high, applied data to it, and rapidly found this tool was doing exactly what they wanted to do. So AI is going to give us lots of opportunities. Also, you're going to find that when Jake was asked about AI, one of the first questions are you going to have the Terminator showing up at people's doors? Well, that's a dangerous prospect, because in that battle for information, you can also poison AI. So there's probably going to be, just like Jake said, an input from a human in that place. Is this new? Absolutely not. It is speeding up the decision cycle, just like we do TTPs, ROEs, kill boxes. That's to ensure that we don't have to go back to the decision chain again and get it up. In a full-fledged JADC2 future, and I wish I was telling you that I was exaggerating, but I got to run to the White House, but I will tell you, in the larger picture, when you have air, land, sea, space, cyber, and you get that all correlated with AI, with clouds that are fixing themselves and moving back and forth, you will have scenarios where there'll be automatic shoot pieces. The Patriot has this capability. There's others when, if you think about all the capabilities you can bring to the fight, not just what weapon can hit it, you will have multiple weapons that will hit it. It will provide you multiple PKs. Then it will give you, dependent on the probability of the kill and the aspect of the shooter, it can give you collateral damage estimates as you go forward. It can give you logistics information on LD/HD weapon systems that you may want to keep, in your back pocket. I mean, it's never ending, and you'll rapidly see exactly what Salty was talking about. All of these things are additional capabilities that will inform you, and it will all go back to that faster way of doing business, whether it's AI, we've talked about 5G, we've talked about cloud. Cloud has inherent capabilities that allows you to be disconnected from the cloud and continue the fight with the last known good, and it keeps going back and forth, and it really changes the way a lot of people were fighting wars in a previous life. The last part about AI and all of these things that I really want to hit is often we don't even know the capabilities until we've played with them. So what we've got to do is get this cloud out here. We've got to get the AIs out, and you'll rapidly find, whether you're an F-15 pilot and you rapidly found new tactics and techniques of what the radar was doing when you were playing with it, I believe we're going to find lots of opportunities and capabilities through AI and these other pieces that are going to fundamentally change the way we do business. Most importantly, though, not only do we have to find them, we have to train to the point where it's an involuntary reflex as we implement this all-domain piece, as we're creating multiple dilemmas for the bad guys. So I've used up my time. Sir, I can't thank you enough, and I'm honored that you put me with this group, because I am definitely the one that, if you were taking your SAT, which one doesn't belong, it was probably me. So thanks for all you do. I'm going to run on you, but thanks for the opportunity. Out here.
Thanks, BJ. Bill, just a few minutes, and then I want to shift to close out with Salty. Again, how in this very dynamic environment for industry, how do we get past the traditions of how we competed in the past? And it's a capitalistic society. You got to make money. But maybe different acquisition processes will work for JADC2. And then, Salty, if you'll think about it, I promised you today that give you the opportunity to talk about the new Unified Command Plan. And while you're in the organized training and equip business as a Space Force leader, put on your Space Comm hat a bit and what the new UCP means for Space Comm and Space Forces. So Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, so some thoughts. Thank you for the opportunity while BJ finished up to have some time to think about this, because I think we're all trying to figure it out. And that is, again, an area for partnership between the government customer and industry, because I don't think anybody has an easy answer to that. We're all, sort of transitioning through. So the obvious answer is it's a change to the current business model, but what does that mean? I think we have to embrace this whole notion of JADC2 like a system, which is a system of systems, and it's going to evolve over time. So I don't have to own everything. If I'm in industry, I want to bring my best in class aspects that fit into the larger enterprise solution. And I want to remain side by side with my military partner who is developing and staying ahead of a would-be competitor and staying inside of their OODA loop. And so, that's a generalization. It could mean really just about any aspect of JADC2, but for global command and control, it's iterative, it's evolutionary, and you don't have to have a proprietary solution and own it all. You just have to be able to stay with the pace of change. Generally, that means software development and side-by-side partnership and mission intimacy. So, we've had a lot of discussions here at Leidos, but I'm sure it's the same of all those in industry. How do we play in this space and remain profitable? What we do is bring our talented people into the discussion. And that's one thing that I've learned, transitioning fairly recently with some scar tissue still from active duty Air Force into industry, is where so much capacity is resident in industry today. They've been, whether through commercial means and now transition to government use cases, or simply long experience in these areas that will drive the opportunity to better partner, because that workforce doesn't necessarily exist in all quarters of the services, because we haven't brought them up that way, we haven't trained. And so there's a transition period ongoing, but it's really all about our talented people and finding ways to expose them to critical missions that keep them enthused, keep them focused on, sort of national security solutions in a way that they feel good about staying with the company that they're with, because just like in the military, we have a hard time keeping our talented people. So another area that you'd be familiar with, Orville, is smart investments in our research and development that is provided by the company, but informed by the customer, in this case, the government's requirements. And so the more that, Preston Dunlap, Will Roper, and acquisition officials can kind of open kimono, these are the challenges we face, this is where we're trying to go, the problem leveling piece of any good solution, the sooner we can spend and invest our own dollars against better solutions for you. And so I know that kind of communication is ongoing. I think the last area that I would say is really viable on the industry side is the opportunity to partner industry to industry and to develop integrated platform approach to a family of systems that have already sort of taken the integration problem and the complexity associated with that out of the equation. And it's incumbent on industry to find those best-in-class providers of things like, security or data management, or, sort of solution architecting, and the whole space that builds up to, a viable solution that's going to, grow and iterate and evolve over time. And industry's doing a lot of that. We are reaching out. We have very much come to the conclusion that you can't do everything on your own. And so a natural manifestation of the JADC2 approach and the different business model has been to reach out to business partners and build best-in-class integrated platform solutions. I hope that helps.
That's terrific. Salty, take about 3 or 4 minutes, if you would, as we wind up here. Again, the UCP but update that includes obviously Space Force, Spacecom authorities, and how we fight and win across Space Force capabilities, defend our assets, allocate our assets. Bandwidth is always limited and in demand, for example. And then maybe a bit on your collaboration within the UCP at the unclassified level with the intelligence community.
Well, that's a great multifaceted question, Orville. And if I had all those answers at my fingertips, I'd probably have a different job. But no, it's an important topic. And you know, I always comment that I left to go to the desert for 1 year, and I get back and there's a new Space Command, a new Space Force. We got a new service, a new combatant command. I mean, it's an exciting time to be in the space business with the pace of change and the responsibilities that are getting heaped on these tremendous people. From a UCP standpoint, I think what we have to keep in mind is that General Dickinson out at U.S. Space Command has an AOR that he's responsible for, that he has to fight in and protect and defend assets in. And he also has to provide functional services to all the other combatant commanders worldwide. And those capabilities that he provides are critical to everybody else's business. So if you talk about responsibility, I mean, you're an enabler to every other combatant command, and then you have to be able to fight and defend in your own AOR. If I was him, I would certainly argue for budget based on size of AOR, because he's got a huge one to defend. So our responsibility in the Space Force, of course, is to provide the people, the talent, trained and educated and experienced to perform in those mission sets, and then the tools to be effective. You know, the weapon systems, the assured comm links, the networks, the data transfers, all of that is essential. And that's really at the heart of what the Space Force is after, is to be as effective as possible in that. And you know, there's no secret sauce. There's no easy TTP that we just employ and suddenly we'll have all of the capabilities that we need for U.S. Space Command. But I'll tell you where I think it starts, and that's with the people, the dedicated professionals in the Space Force, and that we've assigned outside the Space Force to U.S. Space Command, to the Joint Staff, to OSD, across in the Air Force, our great partners in the U.S. Air Force still. Those professionals are going to deliver. And that's whether you're a first lieutenant newly assigned to the unit, whether you're an E3 brand new in the system. It's amazing what they're accomplishing. And so I guess I would just conclude by saying I know it feels like we're a brand new service, because we are, and it feels like everything is new, but you've got a tremendous amount of experience because we've been doing this part of the business, providing services, providing capabilities, and thinking about the warfighting elements in space for a long time. The average experience of your senior leadership on the Space Force staff is 32 years of experience doing this business. That makes us old, but we've also been around the block and been thinking about this for a long time. And now we have service level responsibilities that we've got to meet to make sure that General Dickinson and the entire U.S. Space Command team has the tools and the talent that they need to get a critical mission complete. And if I could just finish with kind of a harkening back to some of the things that the other panelists have said, as we go to deliver these tools, we have to think about risk management. And I'll tell you from firsthand experience, I believe the Air Force and now the Space Force are some of the world's best in operational risk management. I mean, world class. Now we have to take that mindset and apply it to how we develop and deliver capabilities. And I think there we've got some learning to do. I don't believe we've been as effective in characterizing and then being a little risk-taking when we need to, when it's smart to, so that we can move fast to develop capabilities. And so if we could bring a little bit better risk management into our capabilities development, the way we've shown operationally, I think we're going to be a world-class force for a long time. And thanks so much for the time, Orville. I really appreciate it.
Well, just outstanding. Incredible leadership today. I think finest leadership in the history of our Department of Defense. And of course, it's my job to advocate on behalf of our Air Force, but boy, I promise you, your Air Force Association could not be more proud of you. The wisdom you bring, the experience. And I also think on the side of the intelligence community, that collaboration and some of the decisions that have been made now that are unclassified, and how the Space Command and the Space Force will collaborate with the intelligence community, including NRO, really helps pave the way ahead for how we, again, fight and win, find the enemy wherever they are, hold them at risk, and continue to bring overwhelming and dominating space and air capabilities to the fight. So again, thank you to all. We're with you. This will be a world-class opportunity for all those attending our virtual airspace, our first ever virtual airspace and cyber conference 2020. So thanks again, and we look forward to continue the dialogue.